Hello, everybody, and welcome to Read, Write, Think, and Code with Renee and Sharon. And we are so excited to be here with you. Renee and I call ourselves pretty much education geeks, and we love all things around literacy, writing, mathematics, STEAM, and how we pull all those together to create a really cool culminating experience for our students. And we're really thinking about this along the lines of virtual learning because both of us are parents, both of us are educators, and we know that learning virtually is different than if our children or we as educators are in the classroom. So she and I have been coming together and coming up with lots of different ways to integrate her expertise, which is all about literacy and writing, and my expertise, which is around computer science and coding. And what we have found is a pretty cool, magical connection between the two. So today we're going to talk a little bit about bridging the gap. Well, I don't want to say bridging, but we're going to say bridging between reading and thinking and how that goes in tandem with STEAM or STEM, whichever one you want to prefer. So I'm going to turn it over to Renee. She's going to get us going with all of her literacy expertise, and then I'll chime in as we're talking, as we're going along.
Thanks, Sharon. And I'm thinking about, before I met you, I thought the word coding was scary. Same thing with STEAM and STEM.
Well, and a lot of times people think it is scary, but the truth of it is, really, if you can write a really good sentence, then you can write a line of code. Writing code or coding is just the language of the computer. So when we sit down and we think about a verb, a subject, an adjective, all the different pieces of the English language, that is so similar to what you're doing when coding. It's just you're writing it so that the computer understands. And the computer just happens to understand things more mathematically than we do necessarily with a literature piece. So we have to think about it in a little bit of a different structure. But that's at the core. If you can learn how to read and write really well, then you can be a great coder. It just is a little bit of a different pivot in your brain.
And so it seems like we're going to have a series, right? I feel like there's a couple of series coming up on this, and we hope that you're tuned in for all of the series, but let's start with reading. Start our conversation on reading. We like to think about that reading is thinking. It is complex. Reading is thinking. There's really typically actually three parts to reading. There's the saying the words, which is actually decoding, right? And figuring out, how these marks on a page have sounds, and when they go together, they blend to make a word. And then that word actually triggers something that I'm imagining in my mind, right? So I might say the sounds of k, at, cat, and in my mind I'm picturing a furry thing with whiskers. Mm-hmm. And so there's that decoding piece of saying the words, and then there's the comprehension piece of imagining what those words mean, and then to read them fluently, right? We don't go around parsing out words. At, we might initially, but we blend them all together to read fluently. And you do that bit by bit. We do that with sound to letter, word to word, sentence to sentence. And so really, to simplify it in its most simple terms, right, the reading kind of has those three basic pieces: decoding, comprehending, and fluently. And we want to balance all of those three at the same time. But I really do think about reading is meaning. It's meaning making. Mm-hmm. A lot the idea, and we talked a little bit about this, that riding a bike isn't really about the pedaling of the bike. Riding a bike is balancing. And so if you can balance a bike, the pedals help you go faster or slower. And so if you can make meaning of the text, right, your fluency and your accuracy are going to help you think about theories and grow empathy for one another and advocate for yourself and advocate for others, right? Because if you're not bringing meaning to the text, sometimes I even think of why bother. But you really do need all three pieces.
That resonates so deeply with me as well, because I do have young children who are learning to read right now. And you've helped me think about this differently in terms of maybe it's not so much always about him enunciating the words perfectly, but it's more about him understanding the meaning and what the meaning is. And then that meaning will help us bring in the fluency. And then in turn, he'll begin to understand how the words go together, especially in English, because my goodness, all of the rules, and I have forgotten many of them. So having to, that helped me a lot and give me a little more peace, especially during this virtual time. As a parent, who is sitting with their children while they're learning. Now, I don't really I'll try not to interfere with them, but it gave me some peace knowing that if you didn't get it right when she was speaking, that we could figure out plan B.
And as I listen to you, when kids do picture the meaning, right? Even if like the pronunciation is off, or even if it's not quite 100%, but they get the gist of the scene and they laugh because the cat's doing something silly. That laughter, that experience is what's going to bring kids back to the text that they want to read. And the more and more they're making meaning, which is why for young children, we actually start out doing more of emergent storybook work. This is Elizabeth Soulsby's work out of University of Michigan, but we read the photo, we read the pictures, and we take in all the images so that our brain is working on making meaning. And then we bring in the print later, because it's that meaningful experience, right, that triggers our heart and our mind, that makes us laugh. That's the experience that brings us back over and over and over again to the text.
And that's part of what comes into the development of anything technologically. We want to have meaning or some type of meaningful interaction with the technology that we are using. And if we don't have that, we don't use it. So the computer, we're able to do a lot of different pieces with the computer, with an app, with any other software, in particular software that you use to accomplish a goal. If you have some type, maybe it's it could be an art app, it could be a recipe app, it could be a time management piece, or when to water your plants. But if you've got some kind of interaction with it, you want to come back and use it. It has meaning.
It makes me think about our purpose, right? Like the bigger purpose or the bigger why. Simon Sinek always talks about starting with the why. And that's what you're saying is making me think of our why, right? And so I do think meaning triggers an experience that will want to bring readers back over and over and over again to the text.
I agree.
So how do we do that?
Right. So I was thinking, so how do we do that virtually? Give us the lowdown. What do we need to do here?
Yeah, well, and I think I've been thinking a lot about adding longevity to my teaching. So whatever I'm thinking about that was successful in brick and mortar, I'm trying to imagine using that in virtual as well, and vice versa. And one thing to think about is when we're reading, especially when we're reading aloud to kids, I think it's helpful to think out loud for them our process. And whatever that means, it could be just a reaction. It could be you laughed. It could be a question you have, whatever that means. And I think a lot of times an entry point into thinking aloud for students is to think aloud what you're picturing. Right? Envisioning. So envisioning, so we can take a word of another and envision them in our mind and really create a mental model or create a movie that's got action and that's got voices and that's got sounds and that's got smells. We're able to then react to it, or able to grow a theory, or able to empathize for the character. And so a lot of times I begin and I encourage either caregivers at home or readers themselves to start thinking about how are we taking in the words to envision to help us make meaning, and then take that meaning into character work or thesis work, and beyond. It kind of evolves. How can we help students transfer our thinking aloud to the books that they read? And so this chart, yes, is color-coded by sticky, but I do believe in creating multiple access points for students. You all thinking right now, let's look at the yellow Post-it, or are you envisioning, let's look at the blue Post-it. So they have an image, they have color, and they have a word that I can coach them by. So there is really no wrong. Just kind of thinking about, like, even just the idea of thinking, what are all the things we can think about? That could be a chart. Or what are all the ways we can vision with our sight, our sound, all of our senses, what we hear, what we smell. We can allow ourselves to wonder. So each one of these sticky notes could be, a series of think alouds or a series of teaching. I tried just a little bit of this work with you to help, so you could also try a little to see the connections between our literacy and our STEAM and STEM work.
Teeth Dance with Silver by Mahogany L. Brown. Eliza is dressed uniquely, like a mannequin from 3 different stores. She wears a red dress with pink leggings underneath. She wears a yellow sneaker on her right foot and a white sneaker on her left foot. Her socks have bumblebees dancing on them and touch her knees. She sports candy pop rings on both of her thumbs. She wears a scarf the color of grass, and her teeth dance with silver. Some kids whisper, "She's not matching. That's so weird." But I think when she walks in the room, she demands attention. Her ponytail's curly and hair ties bouncing, her eyes smiling before she even says hello. Her smile is a lighthouse that no one can turn away from, her hand outstretched in friendship. I ask why she wears so many colors at the same time, and she laughs. Streamers of silver everywhere, she says, "Red is one of my favorite colors. Pink is the color of the flowers outside my window. Yellow for the bumblebees that make honey and for the sun. My mom nicknamed me Sunshine. Eliza is my hero. I tell her I think she's cool. The way she sees a rainbow every time she looks in the mirror."
I'm going to take the words and I'm going to invite you to do it along with me too. And I'm going to picture Eliza as holding also dances a big, big, big smile, and I see the bumblebees on her socks, and I can picture a bright yellow. I'm not sure if Mahogany gave me that word, but I'm getting yellow to the edge of her knees, and I can see her different color sneakers, and I love the fact that she is confidently wearing these different parts of her outfit that I can I wonder what she loves her. She's got someone in her life that she models her thinking after, or she's boldly kind of making a statement on her own. I love all of that.
So, and I think what's really great about what you're putting forth is, first of all, the color coordination of the different vocabulary words and processes of think, wonder, envision, and react. Okay, all of that gives a framework around which the children can start thinking about what they're learning. The piece that I find so interesting that correlates so well with coding or with computer science is the whole process of computational thinking. And computational thinking is where we step back and we decompose a problem, we pattern match, we take out what we don't need to solve the problem, and then we create steps to solve. So that, to me, is exactly what you're doing. It's not necessarily solving the problem, but you're cultivating the meaning and the envision and the visual part in your brain. The other piece that you could tweak to this as the teacher is ask the students to share and start gathering information on the patterns that you see that the children all say. Like, I don't know what they come up with, right? But it would be interesting to see their patterns and start navigating their thought process.
What's so interesting about that is that eventually, so I'm kind of modeling a little bit of like an envisioning, some skills and strategies to envision to enter into a text. And once that becomes automatic, we do actually shift into, say, when we're reading fiction, an incredible skill set to have is analyzing literally patterns of characters. And so it's really interesting to see what characters do, with what authors do with their characters. And when a character breaks their pattern, that's usually a place to pay attention to, right? And we learn about people in general, but certainly characters on books because of the things they do in and out. And authors will intentionally break a pattern for us to pay attention to, or give us some kind of signal something's going to happen in the plot. So pattern recognition is really interesting.
It is, and it correlates so much with, well, I mean, let's be truthful about this. Technology obviously came along long after our thought process around storytelling and reading and writing. And so all of those elements are the core piece to how we begin to develop a technological solution to meet our needs. So let's recap. We have said that, our our excitement is around finding those links between literacy and computer science and coding, and how we can apply those to enrich that virtual learning experience. So Renee has said she's read aloud an example, and then given 4 different elements that you can use to help have the students begin to think and create and get a better understanding of what they're reading. And then maybe tweak it just a smidgen to talk a little bit about the computer science or computational thinking concept by beginning to have a conversation around patterns, about, well, what does this young lady look like? Let's start thinking through this process. And, just by reading that small segment, then you could even have a conversation. Well, now what is she going to do? What is the story about? And even that piece starts thinking about problem solving and decomposing thought processes around that, and engages them in an entire different experience than just reading the story aloud.
Yeah, just hearing an auditory experience. I think we're combining that. We're really doing all 3 of the reading puzzle. We're decoding the text for students, we're reading it fluently, and then we're adding that thinking. And I'm only halfway through the poem. So to your point, I might stop the next section and let students talk a little bit. Or if I'm doing this at home, I'm going to read a little and think a little. I'm going to read a little and think a little. If you are a classroom teacher, it could be interesting if you wanted to think about your tech tools around Read Aloud and what we're talking about here. I think sometimes recording part of your Read Aloud on some kind of recording app would be really interesting to experiment with, or even just an audio portion. I know for our young children, we do a lot of their work is through the image, so they want to see images. So maybe even taking pictures of the pictures and importing them into a slide deck. But some of our older students, if we really do want them to work on envisioning, we actually just want them to hear the text and then allow them the space to create the imagination and the envisioning.
Well, yeah, the thing is that with tech tools and enhancing the reading, one of the things about us as humans is we need to repeat things. And when we're learning something new, repetition is really important. So you could do the read aloud and then also provide a visual of you reading, and then also do an audio recording. And all of those could be put forth on a learning management system where kids can hear it more than one time. And then that also meets the needs that some kids rather just hear it, some kids want to hear it and see it, and then some kids just want to see it.
I think that would be some really interesting research to do. Yeah, awesome.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Read, Write, Think, and Code with Renee and Sharon. And we'll see you next time.